The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Comfortably Zoned with me, the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California. And I've got one of the most interesting buddies a man could have on the telephone early in the morning. Tony DeAngelo, how the hell are you?
I am fine, and I apologize for, not exactly getting this timing the way I wanted to.
Well, the clock has a big hand and a small hand, and it's early in the morning, but you're doing good.
Yeah, it's in the horseshoes vein, I'm doing just fine.
Right. Right. Hey, you kept it in the day. Let's put it that way. All right. Hey, we got a lot to talk about. One of them is the passing of Doc Simon, great playwright, most remembered for The Odd Couple. And
yes.
I don't know what your memories of The Odd Couple are, but it was first a play, then a movie, and a successful play, a successful movie, and one of the most successful long-standing TV serials going. Wow.
It's really something.
Yeah. What a prolific
are we on
man.
The airwaves?
Yeah, we are.
We are. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, where do you start with Neil Simon? I mean, and it's just the first thing, I guess, on Sunday, I had found out that he had passed. And it's funny. There's a generation of whatever you want to call them, writers, technical people, performers to a certain extent, guys that lived very modest existences growing up. They went to, it always seems to be NYU, New York University, on the GI Bill. And then they come out and they start doing things. Like Neil Simon was a writer, started writing for Sid Caesar, started writing, with Mel Brooks. They were just like staff writers. Hey, what do you want to talk about today?
On the show of shows. That's
the show of shows. And then it's like where Neil Simon said, I can actually write a full play. And then, he just started writing and writing and writing. And, I was reading last night, Zig, he had, if you can believe this, he had 4 Broadway plays at once.
Whoa.
And, the kind of guy who, it's, if you talk to him, it's sort of like no big deal. This is what I do. And, it's, when I was, I'm not going to say fortunate, but blessed to have Jimmy Harris on my show. Another guy, just started writing, went to NYU on the GI Bill and, met a guy by the name of Stanley Kubrick. And it's like, hey, let's see what we can do. Let's see if we could sell a few things. And, he ends up doing Lolita, and Paths of Glory. It's just, I became very sad because I said, this is a whole generation of people that we're losing that, we're never going to see this kind of character again. We're never going to see this kind of content and quality. And then the other thing is just modesty. Guys just doing this work, and he's like, I'm just a regular guy having some fun.
Yeah.
But but if you get to Odd Couple, I mean, I always think of Klugman and Randall, and the fact of where these guys were just naturally funny, and they got what he wanted to do, and they just went out and did it, and we all roared.
Yeah.
It's just. It just makes me very sad to know that when we lose somebody like that, we just don't get it back. And what we get back in its place is many times it's, we can go on for days about that.
Well, it's the high price of mediocrity that is the complaint. And there's a lot of mediocrity going on at this point. Speaking of which, it's been a long season baseball wise, and we always when we get together, we always talk a little baseball along the way. why is it that the lilt has been taken off the rose for an old traditional baseball fan?
Oh, do you want my, as my father would say, my chief cook and bottle washer's tour of all the things that are wrong with baseball as a whole?
No, I want the thing that stands out in your mind most. We know there's a lot wrong with it, but I have a follow-up question for that. So what's the thing that stands up in your mind for the decline of baseball?
The powers that be in baseball, the so-called intelligentsia, the bean counters, the saber mathematicians, the Harvard guys, the Yale guys, the guys with the iPads, people in Major League Baseball have thought very stupidly that they could make an imperfect game, which really the baseball and the beauty in baseball was its imperfections. Did that ball, was it really fair or foul? Did Jackie Robinson steal home off of Yogi Berra and Whitey Ford in the 1955 World Series?
No, he didn't. In answer to that question.
Yeah, Yogi walked by that picture in his museum for years, and any time he walked by, he'd stick his thumb up and yell, "Oh!" And people I know saw him do it. I mean, it really did happen. But it's it. Baseball's beauty was its imperfections. What did we always say about baseball? It is a game of inches, and we never knew which way the inches were going, and it gave us something to talk about. And it gave us the great manager fights, and it gave us the arguments, and it gave us Earl Weaver, and it gave us Billy Martin, and it gave us Ralph Houck, my all-time favorite, the best dirt kicker in the world. We don't have any of that anymore now. And now it's like what's so disgusting to me is when the replay is being played and you have, the two umps and you have the spotter and the guy who's standing on base wondering if he's safe or out and the two managers are looking, they're having a conversation like they met each other in Macy's. It is so troubling to me. No, I don't want to see people hating each other, but the whole thing with baseball was competition. You're trying to beat the other team. There used to be an anti-fraternization rule. If you talk to somebody 30 minutes before the game and through the game, you're fined $50. Because we want people to compete. We want them to do the best they can. And it's just, and that's my whole thing of why is baseball the way it is, because we've tried to machinate it, and then it's always like, well, let's try to do something else. Let's try to start the 15th inning in an extra inning game by putting a runner on second base. It just gets crazier.
Yep.
But, I think today's fan, the fan who is paying the money, where I'm not paying a lot of money, I might go to 2 games a year, and then I might, I'll have my MLB package on my Roku, and I'll watch the games, which, of course, they don't let me see the local games until after they're over. The fan that's paying the money wants all of this stuff and wants to see the home runs and wants to see the replays and wants to see the fancy statistics and the launch angle and the stat count and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm just like, and they want to see, they'd rather see 3 pitchers come in. Mark my words, it'll come to this thing, where instead of having a starting pitcher who, goes 5 innings and gets a quality start, barf, spit, cough, we're never going to see the Gibsons and the Seavers and the Drysdales pitching their guts out anymore. They want to see 3 pitchers pitch 3 innings apiece so they can all throw very hard. That's my quick tour of what's wrong with baseball.
Well, I'm going to ask you what's right with baseball, but I just want to tell you in a minute, but I just want to tell you that Tampa Bay has an experimental thing going now where, they look at the stats and they say a starter who faces a lineup for the 3rd time does appreciably less well or appreciably worse than for the 3rd time through. So what they're doing is they are starting a relief pitcher, let him go an inning or 2, then bring in the starting pitcher. He
Yes.
goes 5 or 6, and then you get the back end of the bullpen. And that has been working for them this year. They just might win 90 games. I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I think they'll come up short, but not by much. And they are literally revolutionizing the game, pitching-wise.
It's today's game. That's the type of game it is. And you want to know something? If that's the type of game it is, fine. Let's go back to the days of, whatever uncertainty in baseball, relying on the umpire's call. And instead of...
well, I was always one to say,
in.
Let's get it right. And they used to say, well, the umps get it right 95% of the time. Well, guess what? The replays, they've had X number of replays, and 55% of the replay calls have been overturned. There's also a problem with the people in the umpires' headquarters in New York that look at all of these replays. They screw it up every now and again.
Well, that's just it.
There is a humanity in it, but it's a faster game. I would like to see, they have it set up now, and Al Clark, my frequent guest and my buddy, former Major League umpire, is going to throw up in his mouth over this. But I think it's time for you get an electronic ball and strike call. These umps suck right now. In terms, it's a faster game. They're old guys. They can't see if major league players can't see the ball, the ump can't see the ball. And the whole idea of umpires have their own strike zone, and some are consistent, some aren't consistent. Put it up, put the electronic thing in there. Have the ump back there to make sure everything is copacetic, that somebody doesn't step out of the box or hit the ball when they're out of the box or balk or this, that, and the other thing. But for the actual strike zone, I think we're ready for that. I hate to say it. There's too much imperfection. It's cool, you get, if there's an occasional argument, this, that, or the other thing, but it's too damn close to call for these guys, obviously.
Well, it's what kind of a game do you want is basically what it comes down to. And if you want a game where you rule out the entire human error factor, and you're right, the umps do blow them. And these are the best umps, these are the umps that have made it up. Now, are there umps in AA and AAA who are probably better, who don't have the seniority? Well, the eminent, truly eminent Al Clark could answer that better than I can, but I'm willing to venture to say that there are, but they're human beings. And it's like, if you want to have a human game with human imperfections and make baseball was the baseball that I loved, then you have to remove these things. Now, if you want a perfect game where the calls are right and, you have every technological means at your disposal, by all means, you have to make it where it's, you've got to rule out any kind of human impression, if it were.
Right. Okay. I'm for getting it right, and maybe there's something in between that they can come up with to improve the game around the ball and strike issue. Because
if you go way back, and I'm talking like Leo DeRocher in his book did a whole chapter on umpires and just tore the cover. Going back to people in the 30s, in the 20s, George Magerkurth and Bill Clem, who he used to call Catfish, and Larry
Pryor.
Getz.
I think Leo DeRocher referred to Paul Pryor as Pukin Paul Pryor. Yeah.
Right, with the green beer, exactly.
With the green beer.
And this whole thing of Frank Pulley with the girl in the room, and he didn't put the shades down, and Satch Davidson, and Bruce Fleming, and who was a young ump at that time, and just umping has always been. I mean, it's never. It was always you complained about the umps, but that to me was a great part of baseball, and we've lost that.
They play Three Blind Mice, the organist.
Oh yeah.
I remember Gladys playing that a lot. It was a different game in a lot of ways. Let's talk about some of the positives. Defense.
Oh, in baseball?
In baseball.
I like the fact that I can watch any game, by pushing a button. I do like, even though I was watching a game last night that I thought would have been a great family game to go to if you're in the region. It was Baltimore and Toronto in Baltimore. Jim Palmer, believe it or not, is still doing the color on Orioles broadcasting. I think he's probably been doing it for 30-some-odd years. He really is the equivalent of Baltimore's Rocky Balboa. He's like Baltimore's everyman. I guess you see him. You go in the restaurant, you see him. You go to the store, you see him. Much like Rocky Balboa, the fictional Rocky Balboa is in Philadelphia. That's how Jim Palmer is in Baltimore. And I say to myself, well, this would be a great take your kid to go to the game and you get a good seat. There's nobody in this park. It is so sad. It's literally you could count the people sitting in the sections. That's how terrible it is. But I think that baseball has tried to make it more family conducive. I like that. I think to their great detriment by selling out to ESPN and making games go on late at night where kids can't see them and there's not enough day baseball. I think they've missed that whole thing entirely. When they don't have fans, 15, 20 years from now, they're going to wonder why. But I think just the, watching the talent, and there are some incredibly talented players, and watching players come in from foreign lands and do well, and also the international players. I like that. I like seeing Ohtani. I like seeing an interpreter involved. I find that very neat. I find that very interesting.
Absolutely.
It's a lot better than when Masanori Murakami was a member of the San Francisco Giants
Just
and they had no such interpreter.
That was the first Japanese player to come over here, pitch with the Giants.
Yeah.
He was pretty effective for a couple of years. He was a relief pitcher.
Well, you know why he left America? He was unhappy, and he couldn't adjust.
Who isn't, Tony?
Well, there's a couple of Hall of Fame pitchers who, whether they had intended to do it and send him back to Japan or whether they were doing it for a joke, I don't know. But the story I heard was they were in the clubhouse and Herman Franks, the manager, walked by, and they pointed to him and they said, "You see, fat guy? Yeah, fat guy. Now he comes to the mound and you tell him you want to pitch." And you feel good, you say, "Take a hike, fatso." Hike, fatso.
That's very good.
and that's what, and believe me, no Asian pejoratives there meant, but that's actually what happened. And then when Herman Frank started getting upset with him, he thought, "Gee, you don't like me."
That's fun. Very, very fun. Oh! So that I got you.
We've come a long way since that. That's a good part about baseball, where you have Ohtani, who looks like a very nice kid, and his family's here, and he's an interpreter. I like seeing that.
Yeah, and incredibly talented. I like the idea
incredibly
that
talented.
There are very few two-sport athletes. In a sense, he's a two-sport athlete because he's a pitcher and a position player as well.
Yeah.
And my buddy Skip Lockwood comes to mind, a podcaster on this network, and I talked to him the other day, and I'm always amazed he made the major leagues first as a position player.
Yes, he did.
And then becomes a pitcher. Has nice things to say about Charlie Finley. Just off the top of my head, I thought I'd mention that. Baseball's a great game. Let's put it that way. And it brings us to the DH. Talking about a complete baseball player. You don't get a complete baseball player with the DH. So I'm just going to ask you your opinion. It's not a right or wrong. It's not. Do you think a DH should be a Hall of Famer?
I think you'd have to go back and look at the criteria of what is a Hall of Famer. And if someone is a career DH and they meet it, I think you have to admit them. I mean, if you look at how the DH started, baseball, the Lords of Baseball at that time thought that, we missed it with Mantle. We may miss it with Mays. We may miss it with Aaron. We want to keep these guys around in the game. Let's find a way where they can swing the bat and, maybe have to run a little bit. And that was really the whole reason why it really was. Kept Cepeda around, I think, another year.
Tony Oliva, a lot of
Tony
guys.
Oliva, yeah.
A lot of guys who were injured, and Tommy Davis, I remember at the end, was a DH. Aaron was a DH, if I'm not mistaken.
Aaron, 2 years in Milwaukee.
Yeah. So
2 years in Milwaukee. Yeah.
Okay, what is your opinion? Do you think both leagues will take up on it, or both leagues will reject it? Because common sense says they have to come to some sort of a way to make the playing field even.
I think a game that's lending itself so much to the home run and the technology and, the excitement and, seeing the ball hit out of the park and things like that, the agreement they will eventually reach is it'll be a DH in both leagues. Do I like that? Well, no, I really don't, because to me, when you had pitchers, Tom Seaver comes to mind. Here's a guy I watched this entire career. This is a guy who worked very, very, I used to go to the park and watch him, very, very, very hard in his base running, on his bunting, on his swinging the bat. He wanted to be a baseball player, and he played baseball any way I could help my team. And, today it's like, interleague, pitchers on the bases, and the announcers are having an apoplectic fit. Well, he's been on the bases for 5 minutes. This is terrible. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
But I will miss that, but I really do think the agreement will be, yes, we'll see the DH in both leagues.
Okay. Who do you think is going to win in the AL East? Is it going to be the Yankees? Can they catch the Boston Red Sox? That's that's the big thing that stands out for me this year, is that race. I think those two teams are not only talented but incredibly interesting. And do you think the Yankees can catch the Red Sox?
No, I think the Red Sox will hang on, but barely.
Okay.
That's my the only thing is I think if the Yankees had Girardi right now instead of Aaron Boone, they'd be a lot closer. Aaron Boone is he's your today's baseball manager. He's young player friendly. He's a very nerdy guy. He likes the statistics. He likes, kind of like he's sort of the harmonious captain of the ship. He never has anything, at least publicly, the least bit critically to say about any player.
He's a player's manager in every sense. In
today's game, yes. who, by far is a dumb guy, was not a dumb guy, went to Northwestern, had an engineering degree, didn't go in for any of that stuff, and, was more of a, where the players are like, oh, he's hurting our sensibilities, didn't lend himself to that. The players were not as happy with him, but they played better. So that's my take on things.
Okay. I wonder how that will work out in the long run. For baseball,
I think it's today's music. I really do.
Yeah.
I think it's today's player. I think it's a millennial mindset.
That's a very good point. A lot of it is devices and games. To get kids back interested, you have to entertain them. And baseball's changing to meet the times, it seems. You can't blame baseball. You have to blame society for not appreciating baseball as it was. That's the way I look at it. Because baseball's responding to the customer's need, that sort of thing. And
and if you go back to, there are some very good and very clear films of 1930s baseball games. They're either on the historical film site or YouTube, or I can't, but you can find them. And there's some 1934 games from the Polo Grounds and Yankee Stadium that were filmed, and they're in sound. And what is you see a park which is filled with people, and they are cheering and booing on every pitch. They're locked in. The players are intent upon the game. Everybody's focused on the game. Today, you could go to the ballpark, and between going in the suite or going in the shopping mall or going in the amusement area and not pay one iota's attention to the game. And that's, again, I think it's the millennial mindset.
Yep.
What, you want me to sit and watch a baseball game?
Yeah. And the
with all this other stuff here?
Yeah. Not the slowing down, the speeding up of the game. What they do, it's the little intangibles that they take away from us. Like the 4-pitch intentional walk is no longer that. They just wave the guy to first. Well, how interesting was it when a guy would reach over the plate and smack the ball into right field on an intentional walk, or a pitcher would throw the ball away, or a pitcher would have a hard time finding the plate in the pitching to the batter that came up next. It just the little things that made it interesting. You mean people don't have 15 more seconds to spend at the game? They have to go home.
Well, it's, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go in and get another handset. You're hearing my lovely half basset here bark. And I'm just gonna.
That's all right. Well, I like dogs.
And I'm gonna.
It's half basset and what?
Hand me that other handset, please. Because I just want to make sure and I'm going to go back in the studio. Thank you. And I think that but how could I put it? The whole thing in time in baseball games is really like, I live in a part of Connecticut that is overpopulated by gambling casinos. And the one thing that the gambling casinos do is they'll run all these ads of Casino A, Casino B, Casino C. And, come here for fun, excitement, and thrills and all this other stuff. And then at the end of the commercial, they'll say, bet with your head, not over it. Now, it's an 80-20 rule because, the way casinos, as Arnie Wexler has told us, the way casinos make them gamblers. And they really want the problem gamblers, but yet they want to do a little lip service to the fact that, we don't see lives ruined. Well, if we make a profit, and, that's really what it comes down to. baseball is very much like that. They want the long game because advertisers who are largely paying the bills want the long game.
Right.
So, and it's, so it's the kind of thing that, this is, we want a shorter, but they want all these promos. And just hang for a second. I'm just going to change the phone.
All right, Tony, don't worry about it. The phone is fine.
No, I am here. I've got a better battery.
Oh.
We are back. Comfortably Zoned Radio. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I have a special guest today. He's a podcaster on the network. He and Tom Simon have a terrific show. Tom's on assignment today and may be checking in, but if he doesn't, I'm going to get to talk to you one-on-one. Fred Walin, how are you?
Football season's almost here. It's a little cooler in Southern California, so we're okay. Donald Trump said something today, Ralph, that you've never heard, I've never heard, anybody who's 200 years old hasn't heard. He actually said that if the Democrats take over the House, midterms, there's going to be violence in this country. Basically, he's advocating violence by the alt-right in this nation. I don't know if that's an impeachable offense. It should be. If the President of the United States make a comment like that. You're looking back in history, Al Gore could have said when he was running against Bush that, hey, the Supreme Court is fixed. I really won the election. Other presidents could have made the case. Nixon in 60 against Kennedy was a close race. Could have said things like, hey, violence might occur. But it took
Yeah, you would say something like that if you were running in Venezuela or a country like that.
Yeah.
That would be common chit-chat. But this is America. And you know what? I didn't hear that, but that doesn't shock me as much as a statement that he made earlier today where he said, what we need to do is regulate Google so that the conservative point of view is brought to the forefront on Google. That's akin to taking over the newspapers. That's akin to taking over the press. And that's akin to the fascist way he's going about it. Now, everybody and their dog sees that, except our friend, Tom Simon, who just checked in. Tom, we got a head start on you. We're talking about Trump's day. I'll let Fred tell you, fill you in on what we've been talking about. Are you there, Tom?
I'm here.
Good.
We opened on the Comfortably Zone Radio Network talking about what Trump said today, and as Ralph just indicated, he wants Google regulated because he thinks it's slanted against him. And I indicated that earlier he also said that if midterms turn out badly for his side, there's going to be violence in this country. And I think you can't go any lower than that, except tomorrow he'll probably go lower. And Tom, you're probably going to disagree, but what do you think?
Well, I think that the people are regulating Facebook right now by leaving Facebook in droves. And I think that's how you regulate these big companies, is you leave them. The problem is that we've allowed Google to get too big. And so they are so large that they are more powerful than even governments that they serve, except in China, where they are bending over to do whatever they can to please China. They want that financial market. It is a difficult.
What do you think of the statements that he made to regulate it to serve so that the conservative point of view is brought up to the top, and just that the government wants to regulate our freedoms?
He doesn't want. So first of all, Ralph, he does not want the conservative point of view to come up the top. He wants what he thinks is an imbalance to be corrected. Now, do I agree with him that happens? Certainly I do. You go to San Jose, San Francisco, and even in the left is dominant there in San Jose and San Francisco. You're there. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
but you don't do that by government. You don't do that by the
If I drive
government.
50 miles in any direction, the right is dominant. In Northern California,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Ralph. It doesn't matter if you drive 50 miles in either direction when the hub, the center of technology in this world is sitting in the armpit of leftist America.
And
you know that's
think
true.
That they are contributing to giving Trump a bad name, or
what I think they're doing is they're contributing a lot to skewing what we see and what we are.
Do you want the government regulating Google, Tom?
No, what I want is people to regulate Google. I want people to regulate Google.
Good. Then you don't want Donald Trump. He wants to regulate it, but you don't think that's a good idea. Am I correct?
I don't think any regulation is a good idea.
Okay, but this one in particular, I'm asking you specifically, do you think it's a good idea that he regulates Google? And then I will ask you, and these are yes or no questions, is it a good idea that Donald Trump advocates violence if the Democrats win the midterm election?
He didn't do that, Ralph. Don't misstate what he did, first of all. I'm not going to answer a question.
Why don't you talk?
That is a misstatement of what he did.
I might have misstated it, but I didn't state it. Fred stated it, and I promised you guys I wouldn't get in the middle, and we keep a balance. Fred, why don't you go on with the debate? Tom, I'll catch up with you. You know, I love the debates, but I don't want you to feel ganged up on. Fred will.
I don't feel ganged up on, but you guys, both of you, always misstate the facts. You got to get the facts right. Once you get the facts right, then
Fred,
you can have
what
a discussion.
What did he say about skewing the election? I'm going to put the thing down and walk away and let you guys, as you so well do in a balanced way, you settle it. I call it good versus evil, but you guys determine what's good and what's evil. And enjoy the show, gentlemen. You guys are great doing what you do.
Ralph, it's not nice to call. It's not nice to call Fred evil.
Donald Trump said today that if the Republicans lose the midterms, there's going to be violence in this country. So you can't tell me that's not throwing the mantle out to the alt-right and telling them what's going to happen. And they're going to do it. And if there's any violence after November, it's on Donald Trump. And I've never heard any other president ever say anything like that. Other presidents have had close elections. They've never said anything like that. John McCain didn't say anything like that. Al Gore didn't say anything like that. Richard Nixon against John F. Kennedy didn't say anything like that in 1960. Nobody's ever said anything like that. But now we have a lowlife in Washington, D.C., who doesn't know what he's saying. He's a lunatic, and he's going to cause violence in this country by saying things like that. It's just like, when he goes after, the immigration thing and Mexicans and Arabs and things like that. He knows what he's doing. He's agitating the right to go after those kind of people, and he's such a lunatic. It's beyond belief, and I'm surprised. Every time you say you can't go lower, he goes lower, Tom, and I don't know how you can respond to that.
Well, it's easy to respond to it if, first of all, Fred, he was talking to evangelicals, and what he was doing was observing what he thought was the mood of the country. He did not threaten to violence. He did not say he was going to ask for violence. He was commenting on what he thought.
But he did by saying that. You know it, and I know it, and the alt-right knows it. By saying that, he's advocating it. He's pushing for it. he's trying to scare people from voting Democrat in the November election. You know it, and I know it. And he's so stupid. And I'm even angrier at the senators, the Republican senators, because they have to know better. There has to be a limit. There has to be a line where you say, no, that's foolish. You can't say something like that to anybody in public, because you know there are enough crazy people in this country who are now going to have violence once the Democrats take over the House.
Fred, you and I talked about this on the Facebook show last week, where I told you that I felt that there was a possibility of civil war if something like that happened.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm advocating for it. That means I'm taking the temperature of the country. Now, here's exactly what Trump said now, because now we've heard what your interpretation is of what he said. You say that he is threatening violence. That's what you say.
I say he was threatening violence.
You did, too, say that, and so did Ralph.
He said he's advocating violence from the right by throwing them red meat. That's what he's doing. I didn't say he's going to threaten the violence. I said he's advocating it from the right. He's throwing them the red meat, and you can't disagree. Well, read what he said. Let the public decide.
Here's exactly what he said, Fred. If you remember, there's a difference between you and I is I deal in facts.
Okay,
here's the facts. Here's the facts. The facts is, he said, quote, this November 6th election is very much a referendum not only on me, it's a referendum on your religion. It's a referendum on free speech and the First Amendment. It's a referendum on so much, end quote. That's what he told the assemblage of pastors and Christian leaders gathered in the state dining room, according to a recording from people in the room. He went on to say, quoting again now, here's exactly what the president said. It's not a question of like or dislike. It's a question that they will overturn everything that we've done, and they will do it quickly and violently. And violently, there is violence, Trump said, describing what would happen should his voters fail to cast ballots. The level of hatred, he said, the level of anger is very unbelievable, end quote. So he's saying...
And he's caused a level of hatred. He's telling the alt-right, if we lose, there's going to be violence. So he's telling them to have violence. That's the same thing. I mean, that's red meat for those people. That's how they jump into his corner. That's exactly what he said. He said exactly what I just told you. He said he's advocating that the right commit violence because they lose the election, and God forbid, it's not just me, but of course...
You're not even listening.
You're
not even listening.
Tom, I listened to every word you said. I listened to him.
Well, we're going to go back over it because we're going to go back over it and give you another chance to...
One second, Tom. I listened to the MSNBC, Fox, and CNN, and Fox said exactly the same thing I'm saying now, Shepard Smith at 12 noon Pacific. Basically, you can't say that because you know people are going to jump aboard when you say something like that.
Fred, he was saying the violence was going to come from the left, not the right.
No.
Yes, he was, Fred.
No, you're not getting what he said. He said, if we...
Okay, I'm going to read it again, Fred. I'm going to read this quote. I want you to listen to the words. I'm going to give you the punctuation. Listen, Fred. Listen. Listen.
That's not what he said.
Listen.
That's not what he said. He said...
I'm going to read you the quote, Fred.
So far, why would the left have violence? He's saying...
I'm going to read you the quote, Fred.
Tom, you're not listening. You're not getting it. I don't understand how you can't get it. He said, we're going to lose everything we've done so far, so what side do you think is going to commit the violence if he loses everything that he's done so far? The left, if they win...
I'm going to read it to you again, Fred.
Tom, you're incorrect. You're incorrect.
Okay, I'm going to read you this quote. This quote, Fred, this quote is directly from CNN,
I'll
okay?
take Shepard Smith. I'll take Wolf Blitzer. I'll take every guy that I've heard today and woman that I heard today. He didn't say the left was going to commit violence. He said the right, if we lose, was going to commit violence. That's what he meant.
Fred,
you know it, I know
Fred,
it.
now you've told me what you think. You've told me what you think. Now I'm going to read you the quote.
Wrong.
Here's the fact.
Wrong.
The quote is from CNN, quote, it's not a question of like or dislike. It's a question that they will overturn everything that we've done, meaning the left will overturn everything that they've done.
Right.
And he says they will do it quickly and violently.
No.
And violently, there is violence. So
one more time, he's telling the right to commit violence if we lose the election, as they probably will in November. That's what he's waking them up in case they don't know, in case they lose the 23 House advantage that they have, that they're going to commit violence because the left is going to take away everything that he's done so far, as if he's done anything so far. You can believe what you want, but if you're a right-winger out there, if you're alt-right out there, you know exactly what he said. And there's going to be violence from the right if the Democrats take over the House, as they probably will. They won't take over the Senate. And it's all on Donald Trump, and there's not a Republican senator so far who has told him to shut up, and I don't understand it. There's got to be somebody with the strength to speak up at some point, but apparently on the Republican side there is not. And your response? Folks, this is a comfortably zoned radio network. I think we lost Tom, or I don't know. I can't hear him.
We are back. Bock score from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 49th Street. It's a great segment. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Got a short crew tonight. David Hubler's not here. Al Blumkin's not here. But George Case III is here. And our mentor, Hal Bock. I will ask you, Hal, what's the score?
Well, Ralph, the score this week is a discussion of the University of Maryland and its football program. I was very impressed by the president of the university, Wallace D. Lowe, who stood up this week and said that Maryland accepted legal and moral responsibility for the death of one of their players, a kid, 19-year-old offensive lineman named Jordan McNair. McNair collapsed on the practice field in May. He was overheated. He had 106 degrees. He was taken to the hospital and died a week later. And the investigation revealed that he had been overused. He had been essentially he was exhausted from the workout. And it happens so often. It happens so often at this time of the year where it's hot and teams are preparing for the season, and the coaches get carried away with their preparation and drive these kids to the point where we had a kid die. And the president of the university stood up and he said, you know what? That's our fault. We did not do right by this kid, and that has to change. And he suspended the coach, a guy named DJ Durkin, and he fired the strength and conditioning coach, who probably deserved it. Right. And maybe there'll be changes at the University of Maryland, but they can't bring back Jordan McNair. He's dead. So I just think that the landscape, the culture of football, particularly college football, has to change. These are kids, you know, and they're not all going to play and prepare to play for the National Football League. They're kids in what amounts to an extracurricular activity. And unfortunately, the coaches get a little carried away with themselves. I don't know why they do.
You know, Hal, every time we talk about something like this, we bring up the fact that there is a chance of playing in the National Football League, and a lot of kids are playing football with that intent. What are the stats? What percentage of scholarship athletes go on to play in the NFL? 20%?
Well,
No.
you have, 30 teams in the National Football League, something like that, right? 30 teams?
Yeah, with 50 guys each, say.
Right. So that's 1,500, I guess, right? 1,500 players?
Right. And that turns over every
year
4 or 5
7 rounds.
years. That turns
7
over
rounds,
every 4 or 5
teams.
years
That's
because of injuries.
200 or so players get drafted. But you're talking about how many college football programs in America? There's probably 350. And every one of those programs has 50, 60, 70 players. So the percentage is infinitesimal because there's just not enough room in the professional ranks for all these players. And the players, frankly, not many of them, not a lot of them, are going to be up to the standard of the National Football League. For every high draft choice, there's a kid who's a free agent who tries out for one team or another, winds up maybe on a taxi squad, and never gets to play in a National Football League game. So, it's a long shot. And you would hope that these kids aren't banking their future on making it to the NFL. I'd rather see them taking courses in engineering and pre-med and that sort of productive career choice and go that direction instead of banking on a 4 or 5 year career as a professional athlete.
Hal and Ralph, I wanted to just mention, Hal, you hit upon, and Ralph, you hit upon a really interesting subject. I've heard the percentage is like 0.1% or something. I mean, it's very, very small. And I've often talked to parents when they, and not at the professional level, at the college level, and they say, oh, yeah, my son's got a full ride to Penn State or Michigan or wherever it is. I say, hey, that's great. I say, I wish him well, but, he's probably going to be 5 or 6 of like players at that position all going for the same thing. He'd be much better off going to a smaller school where he can play. And the fact is that at one time in an earlier era, when I was a college student, we had a lot of football players that were engineers, and they were, in pre-med, and they were doing all that kind of stuff, and they were missing practices because they had a lab or they had a late class or whatever, and that was accepted. Now today, you've got these college football programs. I mean, these kids, they're working for that team practically year round. And, a lot of them have tutors and all kinds of stuff, and they're really not involved in the academic world the way a normal college student is.
Do you think someday it's all going to go and become semi-pro club teams?
Exactly. I was just going to say that. It is virtually semi-professional. The college teams serve as a minor league for the NFL. Right. Baseball has organized minor leagues. The NBA has a G League now where kids play. Hockey has junior hockey. But football doesn't have any of that. Football has only the college ranks. But there's plenty of talent there for them to cherry pick and fill out their rosters. But
and Hal, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's what they're doing. I mean, when they have the draft and a kid, they all want to go for the number 1 or in the top 30 or whatever it is because it's big bucks. But then you get the kids that are 7th and 8th round picks, and once in a while, they do make it, but it's very rare. And, because the amount of money involved and that kind of thing, but it's really tough. And a lot of these college coaches, and I know them in basketball, I know them in football. I mean, they're pushing those kids and they're trying to get them stronger and doing all that kind of stuff. But then you do have the other side of the coin where what happened down at Maryland, which is a tragedy, but I think it's going to happen more than just at Maryland because that's the culture that a lot of the coaches are out there, and the strength and conditioning coaches, they're really pushing these kids hard. And some of the kids can take it and some of them can't, both mentally and physically. So you have some kids that are going to drop out because they say, hey, I don't want any more part of that. And then you have like this young man, he's going to die because of trying to do what the coaches and the strength conditioner, coach wanted him to do, and he just couldn't physically do it. And it wound up killing them.
You know, they talk about risk and reward. Well, what's the reward for a kid who goes through that risk? If
right.
the long shot of making it to the National Football League, that reward is great, but the risk is greater in my mind. And it's unnecessary. It's just unnecessary. There's no
and
need
how
to drive
great is the reward, even if you make it to the NFL? First of all, the helmet stuff goes on, where a high percentage of these guys come out with brain injuries. What else? They go through their money at a high percent. They come out broken bodies and broken bank accounts, and have to die early in a painful manner. So I understand the cheers, and I understand the hero worship type thing, and to strive for that. But, you know, the reward, as we see over the years, has been diminished, and the risk has been increased. So if you're a parent, I don't understand how you could put a helmet on a kid's head.
Well, I'll tell you what the reasoning there. My son, who's now a lawyer in Washington, God bless him, played hockey as a kid. He was a, intramural hockey player. He just liked to skate around, and he liked to be a goaltender and stuff like that. And he did it for the fun of it. But the kids he played with, I intermingled with the parents. You interact with the parents. They were all in it to win scholarships because, well, let's face it, college tuition today is outrageous. So if you can win a scholarship, get a free ride, whoa, that's great. Well, one way to get a free ride is be an athlete. That's a driving force for many of these kids and many of their parents.
But the stories you hear out of overworking these kids in all these sports with the traveling teams, with unnecessary rotor cuff surgery, Tommy John surgery and stuff like that, the Nick Baldestero type academies where these kids are hit tennis balls against the wall or whatever, every 24 hours a day and are regimented. It's just not like it was when you were kids, where you play ball and the really good kids in the neighborhood go on, and everybody had fun. I think the fun is gone.
I agree with you, Ralph. I agree with both of you guys on that, and I can tell you from experience. I mean, I had a lot of friends of mine who, went the college football, college basketball route, got scholarships, all that kind of stuff. But there were other kids whose parents were pushing and pushing and pushing, and I know them personally. They got burnt out, and they said, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. And, I mean, to me, that's tragic because what you were saying, Ralph, and how it used to be fun. We went out and played in the summer. We were playing baseball. In the fall, we were playing football. In the winter, we're playing basketball. One season after another. But we're having a good time and we're enjoying it. And we didn't have our parents pushing us and doing all kinds of things. I think I mentioned one time my dad said to me, he said, George, I'll love you whether or not you ever pick up a baseball because you're my son. And I think that's a very healthy attitude. But on the other hand, I've seen parents that are pushing their kids, and it becomes almost like an ego thing. Oh, yeah, my son got a full ride to blah, blah, blah. Well, that's fine. But at 22 or 23 years old, he might come out of college, never having played, and doesn't even have a degree.
George, I think there's a reason for that with your dad. Your dad was secure in what he did, so he didn't have to live his life through you. And these parents who are these little league parents, I call them, that want their kids to succeed, so they can say, my kid, they wear a T-shirt, my kid is an all-star, and this, that, and the other thing. Your dad had nothing to prove to the world. he let you be what you turned out to be. And
well, you know, I got to say that, and I'm a member of the media. Or I have been a member of the media for most of my life. But the media has a role in all of this. We just had the Little League World Series. We had a team from Staten Island that made it all the way to Williamsport. And they lost in an early round, maybe semifinals. And their star pitcher, on whose back they had ridden all the way to the stage, got lit up. He had a bad day. And the poor kid is crying, tears flowing,
right,
uncontrollable. Goes in the corner of the dugout and he's just huddled and crying. And TV, ESPN, God bless him, ESPN followed him from the mound all the way into the dugout, all the way into the corner of the dugout, and watched and showed him crying. And that's not fair. That's not fair to that young man.
I agree. I agree, Hal. I think it's overdone. I think it's ridiculous. These are 12-year-old kids. I'm an old baseball guy, but my Lord, and I think I sent to you. I was 12-year-old. I got my picture in the newspaper in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and my buddies all were saying, "Man, that's really great." To us that was terrific. Now you got ESPN and you got slow motion and you got cameras following this poor kid into the dugout, watching him cry. That to me is just absurd.
And what's absurd is to look at it like he failed. He didn't fail. The other team was better that day, and he made the All-Star team in Staten Island. He made a team that went all the way. He's successful all those games. That's not failure. That's one team has to lose by nature of the beast. So it isn't the team. You don't fail by getting to the final game.
How about all those kids? How about all those kids that were trying out for the Staten Island Little League All Stars and never made it? Did they fail?
Exactly, and they didn't fail either because they tried out.
They tried, absolutely.
Yeah, the kids when we were young, and George touched on it a moment ago. When we were young, you played ball to have fun. I did. And you played in the morning, noon, and night until your mother called you and said, "Come on in, it's time for dinner." And it was just a fun way to spend the day,
Right.
I wasn't looking for a contract. I really wasn't. I just wanted to have fun, and so did my friends. And we had a great relationship. We formed bonds that lasted in many cases, for a lifetime. Right. Because we were just out there playing ball and having fun. We didn't have uniforms. We didn't have coaches. We didn't have TV following us. We were out there just enjoying the game for what it was. But today it's become so regimented and so driven that the fun in many ways, in many cases, is out of the game, which was what happened at Maryland, frankly. Yeah. Because this
it did.
coach.
Hal, you're absolutely right. It did. They were pushing that kid, way past his limit. And to me, that was the responsibility of the coach and the head coach and the strength and conditioning coach. You have to know the limits of your players. And when you back off, you back off. My God,
is Maryland going to win a national championship?
Absolutely not.
So.
And you know what? It's like I've said before, Hal. It's like an arms race. They're all after each other for facilities. And now Maryland, because they're in the Big Ten, they want to build that program to be like Ohio State or Michigan or whatever. And maybe it'll happen someday, but I think it probably never will. So no matter what they do, they're not going to be the Ohio States or the Michigan. They're going to be a mid-level Big Ten school, Maryland, just like Rutgers. Being a Rutgers grad, I would love to see Rutgers succeed in the Big Ten, but I think it's so far from reality because, the arms race means, hey, you want to go out there, you want to get all these 5-star kids and all that kind of stuff. You think a kid who's a 5-star, a great player, is going to go to Maryland or Rutgers if he's got a chance to go to Penn State or Pitt or Michigan or Ohio State? No way. They're going to want to go where they got a chance.
Then what motivates the coach to bring a kid to? Well, maybe the coach wants that next job.
Well, he does.
Yeah, very good. You hit the nail on the head, Ralph. I think that's very much part of it.
Yep,
They're looking for the next job.
Right.
And
you want to get up. You want to get up there.
Coaches.
Yeah, you want to get up there in the atmosphere, in the stratosphere with Urban Meyer and with Harbaugh and with what's his name from Alabama, Saban. I mean, the amount of coaches that are going to get up there, is very, very, very few. But yet those coaches at that certain level, that's what they want. They want that next job because that's where they climb the ladder.
So, in essence, the coach would give up the kid's life. I don't think he was thinking about it in those terms, but he definitely gave up the kid's well-being.
Right.
Would give up a kid's well-being to succeed and to jump over another coach to get a job. And that comes down to institutional greed. And it isn't just football, basketball, sports. It's business. It's the church. It's the synagogue. It's everything you can think of. Most of all, though, at this point, it's government. And it's really we never could foresee this when we were growing up. I was a few years behind you guys, but not many. And I know the innocence of the 50s, and I know that if I woke my grandfather up from being dead and showed him what was going on today, he'd absolutely flip. He wouldn't be able to believe it. He wouldn't be. It would be mind-boggling. Could you?
The irony of it is, the Big Ten season is opening, and two of the schools, Maryland and Ohio State, will be without their head coaches. Both of them on leave because of behavior that's not acceptable, frankly. And these guys are supposed to be role models, aren't they, for their team, for their athletes? They're supposed to set a standard. And Urban Meyer set a standard by looking the other way at sexual abuse by one of his assistants. And DJ Durkin set a standard by driving his kids into exhaustion and, in one case, death. So, what kind of a role model are those guys?
What kind of a role model is the president of the university that doesn't fire Urban Myers?
There you go. That's why I was so impressed with the Maryland president, who stood up, Mr. Lowe, Dr. Lowe, stood up and took responsibility. I remember in the case of Penn State with Joe Paterno and his crew, and the president of the university didn't say boo. He wound up getting fired.
And he got fired, right.
Exactly, and he should have been. But here is a president at Maryland who recognizes that he has and they have some responsibility here. This kid didn't drop dead because he's 19 years old. He died because he was driven, and he should never have been driven to that length. I mean, it's an extracurricular activity. I wrote in that column, I said it's like the chess club. It's another extracurricular activity. Now, I understand that it raises a lot of money for the university, and the chess club is played in private. But then the bottom line is, some kids like to play chess, and some kids like to play football. And it shouldn't be putting your life on the line for the glory of your university. That's my point.
Now, Hal, let me ask you something. I think you raised a good point, but this has been bothering me. Now, they put Meyer on 3-game suspension. I think they did the same thing with Durkin. Now, do you think that has anything? And I'm just throwing it out. I don't know one way or the other. Do you think it has anything to do with any kind of a buyout clause in the contracts of these coaches? And it's a little bit easier for them to fire the strength and conditioning coach rather than to fire the head coach.
I'm sure it does. And the irony of it is, DJ Durkin and his culture of driving these kids, he was on the staff with Urban Meyer, and he was on the staff with Jim Harbaugh, both guys you mentioned a minute ago.
Right.
So where did he learn these tactics? You know? So
yes.
I agree, Hal. I mean, the whole thing bothers me because I don't know the answer to it. I don't know what goes on, but I do know the culture of college athletics now. These guys are all, like you talked about earlier, they're all pushing for the next job and moving up that ladder. So a guy like Durkin now, Urban Meyer, just like Paterno, they're at the top, but Durkin would like to get to the top, and maybe this will help him. At some point they'll give him sensitivity training or whatever the heck they do and say, hey, coach, have you learned your lesson? He said, oh, yeah, well, I've got a whole new approach to it. But on the other hand, it's sort of like letting closing the door after the horse is out of the barn. That poor kid is dead.
I thought the 3-game suspension, I'm sorry, my throat is not working. I thought the 3-game suspension for Urban Meyer was a joke. I mean, he'll be back in plenty of time to get Ohio State to a big game, and to a bowl game, and line their pockets with money. So, if you're going to punish a guy, punish him. If you think he deserves to be punished, then let him have it. But 3 games is nothing. It's a slap on the wrist.
No, it is, Hal. And you know what? The second game that Ohio State has, and this is my alma mater, the second game is Rutgers. So, I mean, that's no big deal for Ohio State. I mean, Urban Meyer doesn't have to be on the sideline to play Rutgers. They beat Rutgers last year. I think it was 57-0. So, I mean, it's a totally different world. But on the other hand, my opinion, eventually it came back and they fired Paterno. They did all the investigations and all that kind of stuff, but Joe was fired, and then I knew that, he wasn't going to last very long because that was his whole life. Now, Urban Meyer, when he was at Florida, he took a leave of absence for health reasons or whatever, and now he winds up at Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State would have fired him because of the fact that, hey, they got a chance to win a national championship under his regime. And, the Ohio State alumni and the foundations and all that kind of stuff, they're not going to go along with firing Urban Meyer. He's a legend there.
Exactly.
So, I agree with you, Hal. I don't think that 3-game suspension to me was sort of like a joke.
Well, here's a segue into a different topic a little bit. When Ohio State beat Rutgers by 57-0, did they beat the spread?
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, I think they did. I don't think the spread was 57
they did, but you're not really sure, being a Rutgers alum, are you?
No, I wouldn't. I don't follow spreads, but I know that they were heavily favored, and they will be this year too. Right?
Kidding you there.
I know, but it's fun. I agree with you.
How much does gambling affect, or how big is gambling? And now that they've made a national decision to basically legalize it, how is that going to change organized sports as we know it?
I think it's going to change the bankroll of the ordinary fan who's going to be prepared to bet on games. Right. I don't think it's going to affect the athletes one way or the other. I really don't. I know we talked on this show a couple of weeks ago about the betting scandals and the fixing scandals of the 50s and 60s. I don't think that environment still exists. I think players are smart enough to avoid that kind of a pitfall. But I don't think fans are smart enough, and I think you'll find fans lined up at the bettors' windows to put some money down on games. And I think that's not a great thing.
I agree with you. The whole thing scares me, and I'm not a gambler, but the whole thing scares me because I do know people that gamble. I mean, they'll bet you tomorrow whether the sun's going to come out. I mean, it's an addiction. Right. And, it's like drugs or alcohol or anything else. Gambling's an addiction. And I think it's going to be a really problem down the road. A lot of guys, if they're married and have families or whatever, they're going to take money out of the cookie jar that's saved for other things, and they're going to start betting on games.
How much money does an assistant coach? How much money does an assistant coach at Maryland make, or at Rutgers, or How much?
Well, I know the assistants at Rutgers. They're in that $100,000 range, and an offensive or defensive coordinator, they're probably making $250,000. And,
Okay.
and I know you say, my God, $250,000, but that's part of this arms race. I read someplace where somebody was some assistant coach was up, in six figures. He was making over $1 million as an assistant.
Well, I agree with you, and I just wanted to state that $100,000 in Northern California, you can't qualify to buy a house.
Right.
The $100,000. So my point is that these guys are vulnerable to gamblers. There's many, many assistant coaches that not only want to be head coaches, but they want to be head coaches at the Urban Meyer level. And that's unrealistic. So with all the new gambling, the spread of gambling, are these coaches and, put a guy in or don't put a guy in, run a play, don't run a play, win by so much, would they be naturally subject to temptation or subjected to?
I just don't think so. I mean, that's based on not very much knowledge, frankly. I'm not around any programs, but
your first hit on it is that you don't think so.
I don't. I don't think that coaching staffs will be vulnerable, and I don't think the kids will be vulnerable. I think we're past that stage in America. But I do think that the ordinary fan, the ordinary guy who goes and plunks down his money for a seat or watches the game on TV, I think those guys are going to be vulnerable. And I think that's a danger. You see ads. I even see ads on TV now for these DraftKings sites and amazing. That used to be underground.
Fantasy ball, you can choose your player every day, and
exactly.
No, they do. I've never understood it. I've never understood it because I don't play the games. I don't play all these games and Fantagrams and Stratomatics and all this stuff. I don't ever play them. But people do. It's becoming like a religion. And then you've got the crazy thing that happened down there just the other day in Jacksonville at that Madden thing where a kid blows away 3 other people, including himself, because he was
mentally ill kid who.
Yeah, he was upset because apparently, from what I read today, he was upset because he got beat, and there's so much pressure and there's so much money involved. I mean, these are supposed to be video games, and these kids are addicted to them, just like we're talking about being addicted to gambling. They're addicted to these games because they can make money on them.
It's true.
Hey, who sold him the gun, though? He's a mentally ill man, and he legally bought a gun or two in Maryland. Now, something's wrong with a society that's run by the National Rifle Association. No question about that. But
now you can print out guns on your computer. They've got plastic guns that are under
these 3D printers. They can actually make a gun.
What a society!
Where are we headed?
It's a sick society.
Where have we arrived?
Yeah, that's right.
What a way to end the show. Anything you want to close with, gentlemen? You let me know. George.
Well, I just want to say I want to thank Hal again. I think Hal writes some really nice articles and columns, and it gives you food for thought. And I always appreciate him sending and having a chance to read it and digest it. And keep up the good work, Hal. I really like what you do.
Hey,
you're going to love next week,
work,
George.
Both of you.
You know they have what they call a teaser on TV where they tease the next item in the newscast. Well, my teaser for George is you're going to love next week. I got a special one for you next week, George.
Okay, I'm ready. You've teased me enough, Hal. I'm ready.
Because I know where you come from, and I'm in the same area, so you can understand that we're on the same page, and it's easy for me to tease you.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, Hal. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you both. It's wonderful. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We got George Case III and Hal Bock. Nice to have you guys. Be well.
Thank you. Yep. Good night, Ralph. Good night, Hal. Yep.
Good night.
Bye-bye.